There he goes. It's a good sign that they did the little dance right here. It's like the time's right. We're here at the right time. We are on a journey to bring back our salmon, to sing for the salmon, to bring them home again. They're more than just a food source. They are the indicators of how healthy our world is. When the Winnemem knew that the salmon were a target, they prayed about what to do about the salmon. And the Creator told them that they will wait for you. And so now it's our job to get these waters back in order to house them again, to bring them up, to come back to their homes. We've been here a long, long time on Mother Earth here. We have ways of knowing things that scientists don't. We have ways of understanding what it should be, what it should look like, and how a tree feels good, how the birds feel good, how the waters feel good. We're not trying to own everything. We're trying to help people go on into the future. Our grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, and all of the ones that are coming behind us will have a world to live in. We're just one of the tribes in the world that's trying to get this message out. If we don't change some things, it'll be like the gold rush. It's coming to an end. And now there's going to be no more water. We want to share that. We want other people to understand that, because it's going to take all the people in the world to make these changes.
It escapes me that we're in New Zealand most of the time.
But we are here speaking up for the salmon because that is our belief. And that's what salmon has done for us. They have given us our voice when they used to have their own voice.
Seeing like the older fish that we haven't seen before reminded me of people we've lost.
As I have danced alongside them and sung their songs with them, they've given me kind of like a youthful spring inside my heart, feeling really good for the future of the salmon, for the future of the Winnemem Wintu, and for the future of Māori.
We know who we are. We've never lost that. We know we're the river people. And we know we're the salmon people.
Think of the waters, think of the sacred places, think of those salmon, and we're going to do everything we can. Put that down on this ground, that we're calling them back. We're calling them home. So when you put your footprints down out there, drum beats going, that's what we're in our mind and our heart. So that the salmon in New Zealand hear us, they know where we're at to come home. You send out that song, send out that drum beat, and they're going to recognize this. The Winnemems, we say we came out of that sacred spring. When we were created, when the Creator put us out
We came out of Mount Shasta, and inside of Mount Shasta were all of the spirit beings. And while Creator was building everything outside, these spirit beings didn't have any kind of form of any sort. And so when he came in and he said, well, he's created this place and he needs caretakers, protectors, those who will take care of it. And so up on Mount Shasta is a spring up there that has forced bubbles coming up, and everything had water and air in it as it came out. And they started coming out, and when the bears came out, they named themselves bears. And then elk came out, claimed himself as elk. And all of them, even the mosquitoes, had a job to do. Inside the mountain is one little spirit that's still there, wandering around in there and kind of scratching his head and wondering, like, what should I do? What should I be? So finally he goes out, takes a big breath, and he gets out the outside and goes, I'm going to be human. And runs off down the stream. And the Creator thought to himself, oh, that one's going to need a lot of help. So he calls back the fire spirit and the mountain spirit. Salmon has just gone out before him. And so he looks back and he thinks, well, I better help that one too. And so he comes back. And the Creator says, okay, we're going to have fire in charge of their spiritual. And the mountain's going to watch over their territorial. And the water's going to be the way of life. And the salmon came back and he said that he's willing to give up his voice so that this can communicate with all other things, all life. And that once doing that the human would always be obligated for the gift of voice and would always speak for salmon. And so they accepted the fact that they should always speak up for salmon.
There used to be talked about so many salmon across the McLeod River that it was believed that you could almost walk on the backs of them across the river, that there would be so many.
Salmon, or Nur, like we have songs about Lindada Nur, the old-time salmon, that brought in so much abundance of resources to whatever was here, whether it be a flower that needed nutrients, or other fish that needed food, or birds, or mountain lions, bears, everything benefited from that gift that came up the river. And it was kind of an interacted relationship between people and all of the relatives that greeted and needed salmon.
When I'm dancing, at first I think about those fish, and then I think about, the people, and then I think about just like my family. Like if my little brother Nathan, what he'd be like to watch these salmon come up in the river, because I didn't get to see him and my dad really didn't get to see him. So I thought maybe if I dance hard enough, he'll get to see him.
Our name for ourselves is the Winnemem Wintu, meaning middle river people, middle water people. And for us, that's the river that sets between two other rivers on either side of us. That river is also called the Winnemem. Just on the Winnemem, there were 14,000 people. And so up and down the river, it's like there's a whole community of people and a whole process of government structure. There's a whole regulation for all laws of getting along. There's a whole dynamic of citizenship and of belonging.
This is all pieces of that village.
Jenny Charles was born at Audina, who is my grandmother's mother.
All of this is village site here. If you were to go out in there, you would find the house pits. They would be house pits dug in the ground here that would go all the way over the edge and back over to that stream. Well, this trail is ancient. This trail goes all the way from the spring, the Mount Shasta Spring at Panther Meadow, all the way down to past Baird, to where the Pit River comes in.
The Winnemem Wintu ancestral territory is at the upper end of the Sacramento watershed. The Wintu language was spoken throughout the Sacramento Valley down to the San Francisco Bay. The rugged terrain of their homeland helped to isolate the Winnemem from the effects of Spanish colonization and later Mexican statehood.
Life was good. Food was abundant. They had their rituals. They had their traditions. I mean, the worst that they had was boundary issues with other tribes.
But in 1848, gold was discovered, and California was taken by the United States. And a tsunami of gold-hungry men flooded the waterways of the region. Within 6 years, 300,000 people had arrived. They were looking for an instant fortune, and generally, they had no limitations on how to get it.
The discovery of gold by Euro-Americans triggered one of the largest mass murders of California Indians. The best thing a California Indian could do during the gold rush was hide.
The California newspapers of the time were clear on this point.
Stubborn tribes of Indians are like the wild beasts of the forest. When it becomes necessary to subdue them, the rifle is substituted for the axe, and the day's work of slaughter counted up.
This is my job. First and foremost, I'm a Winnemem Wintu dancer. Then I'm a student, then I'm somebody else in the community. I've been looking forward to this since I first heard about it, and this is all I've been thinking about. And now we're here, and fasting, it's kind of like a sacrifice for the people and for the spiritual beings that are here, to show them that we are serious. You have to kind of suffer in order to get into that mindset a little bit, to be more in touch with the spiritual beings that are here and that we are invoking in the salmon and trying to make them hear us.
As the immigrants spread outward from the San Francisco Bay, Native people throughout the state resisted the day's work of slaughter. And the northern Wintu people held out against settlers who established Shasta City, near today's Redding, and were pushing into the mountains below Mount Shasta in search of gold and profitable lands. In 1851, a correspondent from Shasta City writes about the unexplored land of the Winnemem Wintu.
That unknown portion of the country, designated by miners the Pitt River Country, is supposed by many to be a rich mineral region, but such is the well-known hostility of the numerous bands of Indians inhabiting it that no successful attempt has hitherto been made at an exploration.
However, it was not for lack of trying. The gold-hungry citizens of Shasta City organized militias, which would attack and wipe out whole villages.
The Winnemem had no right to even live. They were less than people. In addition to that, they brought in their own laws, which included a bounty on Indians.
You would go to the justice of the peace and bring scalps, and they would pay you cash right there for them.
In 1850, the U.S. Congress commissioned 3 treaty agents to the task of gaining legal title to the lands of all Native people of California.
And when they got here, they realized how many thousands and thousands of Indians there were here. And so they divided themselves into 3 groups, and they started these treaties up and down California, negotiating them with the lure of cattle, food, a big party. And once you sign your name here, you move to these lands, and the lands will be yours forever. Well, it didn't happen that way at all.
It took only 8 months for the agents to produce 18 treaties, taking millions of acres of land from tribal owners. However, many tribal groups were not represented, and many of the signatures were not exactly voluntary. In the northern Wintu Territory, Treaty Agent Oliver Wozencraft was trying to get signers for Treaty H. He tells of his attempts to capture McCloud River people to force them to come in and sign.
I went up among the troublesome Indians on the North Pit and was fortunate in capturing a few of them. To my great disappointment, they escaped before an interpreter could be obtained, thus destroying my hopes of effecting a peace with them.
The 18 treaties, including the one signed by Winnemem leader Namte Rariman, promised a land base, supplies, support services, and perhaps most important, protection to the tribal people who were being relentlessly attacked. But there were huge profits to be made in the land, water, and timber of the new state.
And of course, the papers went absolutely hysterical, saying they're going to give away millions and millions of dollars worth of gold to a bunch of Indians.
The new governor, John Bigley, represented the powerful people who were opposed to any agreement with the original landowners.
Extensive reservations have been made to the Indians of large tracts of lands, rich in minerals and valuable for agricultural purposes, settling in the very heart of our state, vast tribes of savages. A rejection of the treaties is earnestly urged.
When the 18 treaties reached the U.S. Senate for ratification, the politicians went into secret executive session. They refused to ratify the California treaties and then sealed everything from public view.
They were put under an injunction of secrecy, which is not used widely in our system, but it was used there. The injunction lasted for 55 years. So during that time, there was no legal recourse for the tribal members or even for the officials in the Senate side to discuss the status of the treaties. It was basically off limits.
And no one bothered to go tell the Indians, hey, your treaties are no good. And when the Indians would try to go somewhere, to some of the treaty territories assigned to them, they would be told, you don't have any treaties.
Even while they endured militia attacks and starvation, the Winnemums continued to protect their land from the citizens of Shasta City, who still dreamed of the riches waiting on the McCloud.
It is believed that that river and its branches are very rich in gold deposits, while they water some of the finest country on the western slope of the Nevada. But the hostility of the Indians inhabiting that section has prevented its settlement.
In 1872, another group of armed white men made their way up the river. But it wasn't gold they were looking for. They wanted fish. Their leader, Livingston Stone, had been charged by the United States Fish Commission with establishing the nation's first federally funded fish hatchery, and he had selected the McCloud, with its massive runs of Chinook salmon and clean waters, unpolluted by gold mining, as the best location.
We came upon several camps of Indians with hundreds of freshly caught salmon drying on the bushes. Salmon could also be seen in the river, in such numbers that we counted 60 in one spot. It was evident that this was the place to get the breeding fish.
But the Winnemem people soon made their feelings known.
Our attempt to locate a camp on the riverbank was received by the Indians with furious and threatening demonstrations. Their success thus far in keeping white men off had given them a good deal of assurance, and they evidently entertained the belief that they should continue, like their ancestors before them, to keep the McCloud River from being desecrated by the presence of the white man.
So there weren't a whole lot of us left, but the ones who were still there were still feisty enough and believed enough that they held a war dance, even though they knew that they could be shot on sight. But it was important enough for them to do, to oppose the taking of the salmon in that way.
Despite the Winnemem's opposition, Livingston Stone continued with his mission. He was at the forefront of the new field of fish culture, using hatcheries to artificially reproduce fish.
The fish culture movement is very much a part of its larger context at the time. We are seeing the acceleration of industrialization in the mid to late 19th century. We are seeing an increasing effort and emphasis on productivity.
Before Europeans arrived on the East Coast, the rivers ran heavy with Atlantic salmon. But by 1850, the fishery had been wiped out by dams and pollution, and Congress was persuaded that hatchery productivity would save the runs. Stone's mission was to set up a hatchery on the McCloud and send Chinook salmon across the country in specially fitted rail cars for introduction into the Atlantic rivers. For the first year, the Winnemem people remained hostile to the intruders who were taking their salmon. Stone tells of meeting an Indian with a very forbidding aspect on the path near the hatchery.
He told me that this was his land.
This is my land. My fathers have always lived here. You have no right to be here. These salmon are mine. They belong to my people. You are stealing my salmon.
When Indians were being hunted in California, our Indian doctors got together and they saw what was happening to the salmon and happening to their people. And they knew that if the salmon are extinct from our life, then so would we be. And so they got together and they did a ceremony for those salmon. And the Creator came in, Oilobus came in and said that they're going to send that salmon through that mountain, through the ice waterfall. And there they would wait.
The tensions began to ease when Stone honored his promise to give the fish to the Winnemems after taking the eggs and sperm for fertilization. The Baird hatchery employed many of the river people. They became essential to its operation. For the Winnemem community that gathered around the hatchery, the presence of a federal facility with a military guard provided a measure of protection and stability in the face of continuing hostility from local settlers. The scheme to introduce McCloud River salmon to Atlantic rivers was a failure, but the dream of bountiful fisheries had taken hold, and the Baird hatchery began sending fish eggs around the world for introduction into rivers where they had never been before. One faraway place, where the recent European settlers happily received numerous shipments of McCloud River salmon eggs, was in the land of the Maori people, Aotearoa, or New Zealand. At the turn of the century, the federal government began offering allotments of land to the Winnemems in areas they were already living. The people were able to hold ceremonies in their traditional places and maintain a tribal identity.
Because of the fish hatchery, the Winnemem were insulated to continue that kind of lifestyle up into the 30s. You have plenty to eat, you have a place to stay, and you have your traditions, your religion, your spirit world. And so there was a mindset there that kept Winnemems thinking that we're all in this together. We're not nuclear families, but we are a tribal family.
Then, in 1945, after 7 years in the making, trauma struck again.
All of the older Indians had allotments around here. Like this little hump right here was Grandma Delia's allotment that stuck up out of the ground here, but it was 160 acres. But that's all that's left of the allotment now. But all along on either side of the river, there were allotments by this fish hatchery. See where the slide comes down the mountain right there? How it dips down into the, down under the lake would have been the hatchery.
As the 600-foot-tall Shasta Dam reached completion, Congress passed legislation for the acquisition of Indian lands in the area to be flooded. The law required fair compensation to the tribal people whose lands were to be drowned by the rising waters to create a 30,000-acre lake.
They actually promised them that there would be 165 acres. And my grandfather, he felt that everything was going to be okay because they would have acreage to live on because they grew a garden, had apple trees, and and then dried fish and things like that, and that's how they've always lived. And my mother and everyone thought that would continue.
However, there was no compensation, and although the bodies of recently deceased Winnemem were identified and moved to a cemetery, the tribal families were left to fend for themselves.
to remove the bodies of the families and put them out in what they later called the Indian cemetery. So they moved the dead, but didn't really help remove the living. You know, I was like, you're on your own.
They were like misplaced people when they were removed because everything was already gone underwater. My mother had no place to live. I mean, they were just living in a small tent. And then with the baby, there's all of a sudden 5 of them. She didn't have a job. She was used to living off the land because that's all they did was have gardens and fish. It was a real struggle.
Trying to figure out where we're going to live, how we're going to live, letting go of living on the river, getting over the heartache and tragedies that had occurred with the elders, because a lot of elders died on the river rather than to move. The strife was almost comparable to what happened to the salmon.
And the McCloud River salmon, returning, ready to spawn, after 4 years in the ocean, swam 300 miles up the river and hit a wall of concrete.
There was hundreds of thousands of salmon that would swim up the McCloud. And so below the dam, there would be 100,000 salmon killing themselves trying to swim another 100 miles.
The design of the dam included no way for the fish to pass. Instead, planners decided that a fish hatchery could take the place of hundreds of miles of habitat that were being cut off.
Is this Grandpa?
Yep. Grandma and Grandpa.
And while the Winnemem struggled to survive, and their salmon relatives were condemned to extinction, for investors in water, electricity, and agriculture, the dam meant money in the bank.
The federal government created that water project for the purpose of using that water elsewhere, and the water was shipped away. The Indians never benefited from those water projects, and there was never any intention for the Indians to benefit by those water projects.
I had 3 brothers, and really, but 2 of them became alcoholics. When they came home from the service, there was nothing here. And, you know, you go and you fight for your country, you come back, they have no place to live because there's no place that's yours anymore. Sure, you can go to the lake, but the lake, everything is covered. There's nothing. I remember as a little kid coming, the only way you could get in there was with boat, and they'd go up with Auntie. A lot of times when we would even come up to do hazelnuts or something, we'd stop. And it might be where the lake is, and you're sitting there and you're picking, and you'll overlook. They would just sit. And I don't think that's power, because you're not getting any. What you're doing is trying to release at that time. It was a release of heartbroken people. Because I think when you grow up, I know when I grew up, you feel that same pain from your mother. You feel that same pain. And I believe I've always lived with that.
After the dam came in, which affected my dad, his generation was tormented with change. Like, you've got to be civilized, you've got to have a job, you have to be a citizen of this state, you know. Whereas the elders were still like Winnemem. And so for us, it was lucky that we had a lot of the elders still available to teach. For us, Grams or Pululamut was a carrier of our traditions and the medicine woman that reached top doctor in her years here on earth. She and Emerson remained loyal to the Winnemem way of life through all of the hardships, all of the heartaches, all of the changes that happened around them. Grams came into the world in a way that the medicine people here already knew that she was going to be a doctor.
Don't you think that Mother Earth is getting hurt? Just like if somebody come and stab you in the arm or stabs your heart or wherever. You know what's going on in this world. You know what the people are doing. You know why? Because that's little mighty dollars. The more dollars they get rich. They want more and more and more. Are they going to take that with them on Judgment Day? No, they're not.
And I think that her life as a top doctor for us was so crucial. To get us as strong as we are today in our beliefs. We're not floundering about other religions, or we're not seeking other churches. We're not wondering what it is we should be doing. We have the instructions. We have the need, the right, and the capacity.
During the last century, Winnemem leaders were at the forefront of a statewide campaign to sue the federal government over the 18 broken California treaties. And in 1946, Congress set up a commission to settle land claims.
And in the winning of that lawsuit, we also won the recognition of being Indians eligible for services and benefits from the United States in the taking of our lands.
But in the 1980s, for most of California's tribal people, a new label, unrecognized, erased those hard-won compensations. The Bureau of Indian Affairs created a list of recognized tribes, which the agency would continue to deal with. And hundreds of thousands of people whose tribes were not on the list were suddenly denied services, benefits, and protections.
Now we're sitting in a position where we're unheard and unseen as an unrecognized tribe. And so we're had a brief period between the 70s and the 80s where it was not illegal to practice our religion. We use eagle feathers in our dance, in our prayers, and it's an integral part. You have to have a permit to hold eagle feathers, and they revoked that from Winnemem.
It's from the Fish and Wildlife Service stating that the Winnemem went to, you are not affiliated with a federally recognized tribe. Oh, they're a little late in finding out. It's like 25 years.
It's also education. You know, in 1978, I graduated high school and got a Bureau of Indian Affairs higher education grant. In 1989, when I tried to go back, I'm no longer eligible for those services. Here I am, Indian from when I was born to 1986. They counted me. I was an enrolled California tribal member. I have an Indian roll number. But now I'm no longer eligible for those services.
There should not be any unrecognized Indians in California because we have the judgment roll that goes back to 1850, before California became a state. And every descendant thereof is a recognized Indian and had been up into the 1980s. That terminology should never be allowed to exist this day and age with human rights and the rights of indigenous people to continue to exist.
And the tribe has continued to press their right to exist, regardless of labels placed on them. This U.S. Forest Service campground, on the allotment of Chief Sisk's great-grandfather, has been at the center of the tribe's effort to practice their Baklas Chonas, or coming-of-age ceremony for their young women.
This is an old village site. The dance ground is down here. Where that rock is on this side, there's a big dance ground. My great-great-grandfather, Bill Curl, lived here. He brought in some of the cherry trees he planted up there. He's got fig trees that are still growing here. Well, when they put the lake in, Forest Service took 300 yards at the rim of the lake. No compensation, no exchange, no consent.
When the Forest Service refused to close the river during previous ceremonies, citing the unrecognized tribe label as a reason, disrespectful and lewd boaters violated the dignity of the occasion.
What the fuck are you looking at?
So the tribe mounted a campaign to close the river. While the Forest Service finally agreed to close the river in 2012, the agency's own officers repeatedly interrupted the ceremony.
We're just coming up here to see what's going on.
And ended by charging Chief Sisk with a federal crime.
Do you know what they're saying you did wrong?
That I operated a motorboat on the waterway beyond the closure, my closure. The closure that I fought for 2 months, so that we would have a ceremony in peace and dignity.
In 2004, on top of Shasta Dam, the Winnemem brought back the war dance, dormant for 100 years. They danced and sang for 4 days in opposition to plans for raising the dam by as much as 18 feet, which would flood a number of ceremonial sites, including the grounds of the coming-of-age ceremony.
We went to the Shasta Dam and danced on that dam because that's the weapon of mass destruction. That's the weapon that took our land, flooded our sacred places, covered up our burials, everything, and left us with nothing. And today we find out that we're not even Indians anymore. And so we held that war dance on the dam. And the old-time salmon, the Lenara Nur, they came back in with songs for us to sing. Say, we want to come back. We want to come back, the Lenara Nur. And it's like, okay, where are they? And our message was to tell the world. And halfway around the world in New Zealand responded to our call and let us know that they had our salmon.
We're going to carry out a prayer, and we're asking the Maori to allow us to come into their country and to do this dance for those fish.
We made it. We made it. We're here.
We just don't want the site released yet, the ceremonial site. All the rest of it's okay.
It started off with emails and so forth, backwards and forwards across the Pacific between our peoples. Then it really hit home when we got the email that says we've bought 25 of our tickets.
Kelly, this is John.
John,
yes.
Yes, very good to meet you.
We're just so pleased to meet those people and have the spiritual relationship that came about through that. And their feelings for their fishery and how it related to our feelings with the eels.
John knew exactly what we were talking about. The eels go way back into their history the way the salmon do for us.
They sustained our people for years and years and years. It's been their main food source.
And so he could relate that as to why a people would come this far, because he would probably do that same thing for his eels.
The first marae, when we arrived, I think it probably was more surreal than any other feeling. That we were here and they're welcoming us to their sacred house.
So we welcome you here, and we give you our greetings from we, the tangata whenua of the Waitaha people, Ngāti Moamoi people, and Ngaitahu people. That peace and goodwill may prevail amongst us all.
stand here on your sacred ground with your sacred ancestors and ask your permission to be able to do a ceremony, to be able to talk in the way that our fish who are living here in your waters understand.
The Maori were very welcoming. It was surprising to see such genuine love and compassion for our cause and our people. It was nice to feel that from another indigenous people.
We went up the Rakaya River to the spawning grounds to go watch the salmon spawn. We went down to the stream to take a little bit of water and place it on our heads and greet the waters and get greeted by the land. And here's this eel. He just came out, just knew why we were there, and came out and it said hello to us.
And it was like almost like a greeting. Eel came out and said, "Hey, what's going on? How you guys doing?" Just checking you guys out.
What?
That's awesome. You see that thing?
It was like welcoming, and it just warmed our hearts. And then to see the salmon and them actually spawning.
My heart is really... I wish Grams were here. My dad and Aunt Maud and everybody.
These are the salmon that my grandparents would have seen in the same fashion, looking up and down, watching them, decide which one was the best one to take.
It's going to be nice to see him in our own water, coming up our own river.
The time's right. We're here at the right time. You know, even the U.S. fisheries understands that they have to change to bring the salmon back into acceptable numbers.
The passion just runs so deep with salmon. It's something that's got into the blood of the New Zealand community, and you could have believed that they were here naturally. It's actually a fever that takes over during the salmon season. As much as people want to catch them, they also want to work with them and enhance the runs.
We've got about 90,000 salmon in stock at the moment.
I talked to the women too, and their passion just made me feel like we've got brothers overseas, brothers and sisters. We're here to help them out if we can too.
Everyone was there on the shore, and everyone had their little buckets, and they were down there, and they were releasing the little salmon and releasing them into the river there. And I just kind of stood back for a minute and watched as everybody, was letting their salmon go into the water. And it was a real powerful thing that went on. It was a good thing that everybody got a chance to do it, and everybody got a chance to let some of those little salmon into the water and release them back.
Letting the fish go. That was hard. Because it was like getting to see somebody for the first time and then having to let them go. I thought about Granny and all the people that got to see them come and go. And then I thought about my mom and how me and my brother and all my cousins never got to see them come up the river. So it was hard for me to let them go and see them swim away.
I grew up with salmon. All my life we caught salmon, ate the salmon. I love the salmon, and it's part of our tradition. We're salmon people. I thought it was pretty important that I go and get over my fear of flying, to get over there to see them dance and sing and have that ceremony for them, so that they know that we still want them back here.
My grandfather, he was born under the lake when the river was still there. He fished those salmon out of our river when he was a boy, when he was my age.
For me to see my son, who was generations back, had touched those same salmon, and then he got to touch that salmon, it was one of those moments in my life that I feel like very grateful to be alive, very grateful to be here, to know that they touched again.
It's a beautiful thing that you're here to acknowledge, your sacred fish. And our sacred fish, or tuna, come to greet you for that too, because I think they've been looking after each other in these waters. These creatures are very important for us and for our river systems and for our understanding of the health of those things.
Yeah, longfin tuna, that's our native eel. They're a very special thing to us. They keep us alive, they feed us.
The longfin is indigenous to New Zealand. It's not found anywhere else in the world.
And it was the first time that I had learned that the eels are almost the mirror image of the salmon, in that they come up the river to live in the river, and then they go back out to the sea to spawn, which is the reverse of the salmon, who come into the river to spawn and go back out to the sea to live.
Longfin eels love coming in out of the sea and getting into this faster water right from when they're little wee fellas. And they slowly grow and they keep heading up and up and up and up and up until they get right up here in the high country. And they'll live anything up to 100 years or even older. And then they get the urge to migrate, so their eggs form.
It's only the females that come up this far. They breed once in their life only, and they can carry anything from 600 to 1 million eggs in their bodies.
She could be anywhere up to 100 years old, this one. So she was probably here before the Waitaki Dam was built, when she came in as an alva. And I'd estimate, looking at her girth through here, that she's probably got anything up to 1 million eggs in her.
The Waitaki Native Fish Committee works to save the longfin eels in the Waitaki River watershed by catching them and carrying them safely below the 3 dams that stop them from getting to the sea.
If they go through the intakes into the turbines, because they're so big, they get chopped up. And so we trap them and help them on the journey by taking them down past the dams and releasing them back into the water to carry on in their own way and finish their journey down to the sea.
We have to do our best to ensure that we keep them coming back into our waterways.
It is kind of an incredible kind of a day, because at home we're talking about going to New Zealand or going to the fire, and we're planning and praying that it'll happen. We don't know how it'll happen, but somehow it's going to come about. Yeah, this might be the best spot.
Okay. That's brambles. That one's prickly.
Glass right there.
Yeah, we're going to use the rocks. And now we have more people here than I thought we could bring. But somehow there was a way made to get everybody here. And this place, this grounds right here, I couldn't imagine what it would be for us. But it's beautiful. It's the best place. It's right on the river. And it was made easy. You know, that the Maori had looked at it prior to us getting here and felt it too.
Mai te tipua, mai te tapito.
I gave thanks to all those things and all those blessings, and to remind our deities to protect us from the unknown. And then I was able to hand over the authority or the mana of the area to your chief, Kaylin.
And so now, you know, as these guys are getting dressed and getting ready, it's kind of like you're still in that dream state where you think, is that real? Are we really going to do this right now? Here we are, getting ready to put our footprints down on this ground. This is a sacred area for the Maori. They have cleared that for us with their ancestors.
This was the easiest 4 days I've done in a 4-day fast and dance. The spirits were there. I know we had the Maori spirits there helping us. At no time did I get hungry. I wasn't overtired. It was just really, you're just energized. It's just so powerful.
This was something really special because you could feel the power behind it and what they were trying to do. And you became part of it. You weren't an outsider looking in, you were actually part of it. And that was really awesome. It's the only word I can think of. It's awesome.
You just dance as hard as you can, and you look at your singers and your other war dancers, and then you just want to be as strong as you can because you realize why you're there and what you're dancing for, and you want to make it as strong as possible to make the whole motion of the tribe just make it stronger.
When you sing harder, the guys dance harder. And when the guys dance harder, it makes you feel like you are helping and you want to sing harder. We have to sound like we're all together, and I think we did that.
When I was dancing, I could feel it. Everyone, the singers were singing loud, the drummer was drumming hard, and everyone was around me just yelling, like hollering, war cry, and then I could just feel it, like in my body. It just got light, it felt powerful. And then I put my hand to the mountain, you know, prayed for the salmon. We're here for these salmon. Let them make their way back home. And I prayed to the river and I prayed to the fire, and give me strength to help me do this. And we continue being like this strong.
It's wonderful that you're here. It's wonderful that we've connected here.
Yeah.
For your purpose on our whenua is just, something special.
We put the river water down around the ground so that we could tell the salmon, look at us, here we are. We're here for you. We want to do everything that we can to bring the salmon back to the Winnemem, back to the home water.
And if we focus on the salmon and the eels, if we stop things from destroying them, Mother Earth will be better. But it's the good people in the world that have to stand up and do the right thing. You know, say the right things, make the right laws to protect Mother Earth. Because that's all that tribal people want to do, is to help make things good, make things better. You have helped us to complete the beginning foundation of our fish return. We have new family that we love and care for. You know, our homes are welcome for you to come and be with us. Our ceremonies are open for you to come and be a part of them.
As the morning sun touches Mount Shasta, tribal members and guests at the annual summer ceremony pray for spiritual support and guidance.
I ask you to send down those good blessings to each and every one in this circle, everywhere they come from, their people and the way of life, protecting the waters and protecting the other relatives that we have.
Among the guests are some of the tribe's New Zealand family who have come to represent Maori tribes and New Zealand Fish and Game in meetings with U.S. officials on the minimum goal of bringing their salmon relatives home. The National Marine Fisheries Service has a mandate to restore salmon above dams on the West Coast.
We're working on a salmon recovery plan for the Central Valley, and in that plan it says we can't recover wild salmon without getting them back to the mountains, and specifically to the McCloud River. You know, when we talk about salmon back in the McCloud and the folks that are behind it, right now it's you guys and us, and not a whole lot of other support.
The Winnie and Wintu are so concerned about their spiritual connection to the salmon. Why have we never heard of this until now? And why are they allowed to go halfway around the world to bring a fish back here that's absolutely not native here? Is this an agenda for a future dam removal ploy on the Shasta Dam? Looks like it to me, because once the fish are there, they're going to have to live, and once they live, the dams are going to have to come out so that they can run free to the ocean and reconnect everybody's spiritual interest to the fish. National Marine Fisheries has been involved in these frauds in the Klamath Basin here for 10 years now.
Salmon is a economic development. It is a way to make a living. It does bring economy back to the counties, back to the farmers and fishermen. These things can be productive in the way that you guys think. But for us, it is a spiritual connection. And when people say things like that, I can see that there is still racism alive and well. Alive and well. Because we have survived a lot of issues and deals and treatment through the time that we have witnessed the statehood, the counties, and all of the landowners taking on things that they leave us out of. You know, we're left out. We're left out of the crimp. We're left out of the homeowners. We're left out of the ranchers, the federal government. Yet we are a people who should be considered somehow. Thank you.
So it takes all of us to bring our prayers together. You know, find that courage to have voice. Even when we're shaking in our boots, you know, we got to have our voice. And even when they act like they're the experts, they're the scientists, that we have to hold our ground, because there is no stronger science than ours.
In another meeting with National Marine Fisheries, the tribe is encouraged by the agency's offer to engage in a formal relationship.
It seems like we'll be players in this, as well as New Zealand and the Naitahu tribe. And we look forward to working through this, get our salmon back.
But at a later meeting at the tribal village, a National Marine Fisheries official is reluctant to include McCloud River Chinook from New Zealand in the plan for restoring salmon above Shasta Dam.
But I can't tell whether that project that you have, because of the broodstock question, is so significantly different than this reintroduction we're talking about, that even though we're both talking about reintroducing salmon, is that the same project or not?
We're trying to convince you that the best broodstock is that in New Zealand. Cleanest, the less polluted, the ones who have the DNA and the memory to go this high on the river are those fish. They were not the ones in the lower Sac that already beat themselves out, and the ones that went into high waters probably are already gone in the first 7 years.
And an official of the Bureau of Reclamation, which operates Shasta Dam and holds the money for the salmon restoration project, is even less enthusiastic about a partnership with the Winnemem.
So what I can tell you I will do is take your plan, and it will become part of the process that we use when we consider what will this pilot program actually look like.
this would be one of the alternatives that we would consider when we're looking at what we do in that pilot program.
We don't want to waste our time either. You know, we don't want to be dangled on a string and saying, okay, you know, maybe, maybe not, maybe, maybe not. And so we want to be part of the team. We want to be part of the decisions that are being made.
I think that's great that you want to go off and do the work, but I don't want you to feel like that your work is going to be.
We don't want to go off and get this all done and you say, oh, that's one alternative, here's another one, and here's another one, and now let's get our team together here and we'll decide.
That's why we have
it's like we want to be on the team of the one that's designing what's going to happen to our river.
And you know that'll be difficult for us to do.
You know, our want for those fish to go back up there isn't going to be monetary gain for us. It's not economic development for us. It's a spiritual connection. It's a obligation that we have to these fish to remain so that we remain. You know, you're gonna retire. I'm never gonna retire. I'm always gonna be worried about those fish. I'm always gonna be looking for the DNA of those fish to come back. Take a pinch of this and I want you to pray. What we want to do, bringing back the salmon, is the exact same things that our ancestors and our elders have always wanted. We're not moving. We're not changing. We're holding our ground. We're going to stand here and be with the sacred places, be with the sacred things here. This is going to be full of salmon someday. All the way up, they're going to be full of salmon. The Lindada Nor, the old-time salmon, they're coming. And we just have to be strong and pray for it.
There is nothing more powerful than a belief system that has come of its time. Nothing more powerful than that. Your time has come. Your time has come.
Your fight is hard, your fight is long, but Keka, be strong, stay tall, never stop, never back down, never let them get to you, and you'll come out on top.
We went to dance for the salmon, pray for the salmon, bring them home, and I believe that's what we will do. In the end, we will have our salmon back.
You never give up because you build more strength with the songs and the power of the dance and the power of that drum, because that's your heart. That's the heart of our people.
Indigenous people around the world are gathering up their strength, gathering up their ways to defend Mother Earth in the way that they know that it should be.
But I would plead with the people throughout the world, listen to what your Indigenous people are telling you, because if you don't, you are not going to survive.
Change needs to happen. It might not be noticed yet, and it might not be seen by everybody yet, but there is a change that needs to happen, and it needs to happen very soon, or else things are not going to end up well for everybody.
Without the salmon, we can't go on, and the salmon are helping what they can do, and we need to help what we can do.
And if we keep our eyes on the salmon and follow them and help them, then we have a chance to change things. They're climate changers. And being climate changers, they will lead the way if we let them.